Welcome.
Welcome.
Today we're talking about soul healing and the archetypal stages on the path of healing. You are listening to Magenta FM, Season 2, The Art of Mental Health.
We will bring some lesser known and some downright strange approaches to consider and explore.
We'll draw from our own experiences with healing and from our work helping others, plus our research into little-known fields of inner development.
We'll share tools and practices that help us heal and put the power and agency to heal back in our own hands.
This podcast and YouTube show represents the opinions of Rachel and Louisa. The content here should not be taken as medical advice.
The content here is for informational purposes only. And because each person is so unique, please consult your healthcare professionals for any medical advice.
What are some of the kinds of wounds that people are healing from? Is this just like major trauma wounds, or is it more like subtle forms of wounds?
Well, it's soul wounds. You know, obviously we're not talking about, and we aren't going to ever talk about physical wounding, right? That's not our wheelhouse.
Yeah, though we do believe that the soul wounds will eventually lead to some physical ailments, but
yeah. But we're really after
working in the soul.
Psychical soul, wounding. And, it could be a little bruise where you're trying to understand an altercation with a friend and you want to figure out how to find a way through that with your friend. Or it could be some deep, difficult traumatic experiences that you've been through,
or some major existential crisis.
Yeah, dark night of the soul.
Yeah,
anything really. You need a navigational tool to find your way through this, and so we decided we wanted to do this episode to give you that. So imagine that you're going on a journey, and you're going on a journey because you're like, I need to heal from this wound. I need to find a way through. And you get your little boat and you have your little map. Here's my plan for how I'm going to accomplish this. And the map has a lot of details on it and it's ready to go. And you set sail, and then after a while you're like, I need my map. So you open it up and there's absolutely nothing there. Your plan is not going to work. It doesn't function in this new environment in which you're in. So what do? You're already out there in the middle of nowhere. What are you going to do? Well, what you're going to do is learn to read the waves. You're going to learn to read the stars and navigate that way. So basically you have to learn these new capacities so that you can navigate and find your way to the far shore.
Yeah.
So that's the idea here. It's not about, okay, here's the steps in the map that I now have to follow. It's not that easy, I'm afraid.
Yes.
Yeah, but
it's navigating the terrain.
Yes.
And so we have to learn how to navigate the terrain of our soul, which is mysterious. And an ocean is a very good analogy. Out in the open ocean can be a bit daunting and intimidating. I would be very intimidated to be dropped in the middle of the ocean.
Yeah, me too, man. But the idea here is that there are archetypes at play.
Yeah.
And if you know what they are, then you won't fall into, and one of the dangers on this path is you're out there in the ocean, you don't know what you're doing, you don't know whether you're doing okay or not. So we can get very self-deprecating. We can be very down on ourselves. We're failing, and we're not finding our way. We're stupid. We're not getting it.
Just this is the best I can do.
Yeah.
You may not even see your soul wound as a path of healing. You may not even see that you're carrying these wounds in you and these limiting beliefs, and that your conclusions about yourself and what you're capable of and what you're here to do are far from what you are actually capable of.
Yeah, maybe you don't even know.
Yeah.
And maybe you've started out with some beliefs, and we're going to get there, about how you're a failure.
Yeah.
And so the idea with this navigational tool is that it's working with the archetypes that already exist in nature. Nature is full of analogues of the archetypes that we're going to share with you. But they are archetype because they're archetypal. They are universal human experiences that you will have on a path of true healing. Mm-hmm. So it's important that you know what they are, and they're not very complicated.
Yeah.
But they are deep. So we're going to have to spend some time on each one. If you're after a simplistic answer, this is not what this is, because it's not a tool or it's not a method or a exercise you can just run and move through all the things. It really is about learning to navigate with your capacity.
Yeah. And some of those capacities, not to complicate things, some of those capacities are going to come through the use of tools and methods. So we're going to go into that. But
that's true.
It's
Good
not
point.
Formulaic.
Yes.
And how you navigate this ocean of your soul is going to have its own unique shape and gesture for your personality, for your temperament, for your destiny.
Yeah.
So it's not a formula that, a worksheet you can take home, but there are tools and methods that can strengthen the capacities you need for this navigation.
Yes.
And we'll get into those. We'll mention those throughout the episode, and this is the work that we teach in the school.
Yes, it is, and specifically inside our membership. But you will know what we mean. If it sounds a little mysterious right now, you will know what we mean when we do this walkthrough.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and do a high-level overview of the stages of healing.
Okay, so we're going to walk you through 4 stages, and we're going to use the symbolic language of the classical elements: earth, water, air, and fire. And they're quite helpful because they're quite pictorial, and they do help us. They do help give a picture for each of these phases. You'll see. So we're gonna that just makes it less abstract and more hopefully concrete.
Yeah.
So here's how we're gonna sort of run you through it. Just imagine a clock face, and if you imagine 6 o'clock down in the bottom, we're gonna say that that's Earth, and then if you move clockwise up to 9 o'clock, that is water, and then move up to midnight or 12 o'clock, and that is air. And then over to 3 o'clock, and that is fire. And the reason why I'm saying that is because imagine that this is, there's a movement. You start at earth, go into water, and then to air, and then finally arrive at fire. Mm-hmm. And then you start again at earth at the next place of suffering and wound that you want to sort out. So there's this... it is actually related to this incredible book that I have called 7 Arrows by a Native. It was one of the first books written by a Native American. And all the books, I think it was written in the 1970s. And all the books that were before that were written by white people about the Native Americans. So it's really one of the first truly authentic accounts, and it's full of stories. It's a story of the time when the white man began its genocide of Native Americans. It's a devastating book. I've never been able to make it all the way through. I can read bits of it, but it's full of medicine stories and teachings, and it really gives you a feel, I think, for how profoundly sophisticated the Native Americans' knowledge of the soul was, and how much we have lost. Like, we think we know, but we're nothing on what they understood and knew and prioritized in their culture.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's still there, with the people who are still alive today. It's also there in sort of the spiritual potential. It's never lost. Okay, so I'm going to have a go at saying his name. It's Hayameyost's Storm. I'm sure I'm butchering it. I'm so sorry. But he, what I'm seeing is that he was from the Northern Cheyenne tribes, born on the Lame Deer Agency in Montana. So if you're watching on YouTube, here's the book. I highly recommend you get it. There's a story we're going to reference later on when we talk about air.
Okay, so let's take a quick break and then come back and dive into Earth, the
All right, let's
stage
get
that we're
into
going to
it.
begin.
Are you hunting for a way to finally transform all that's been keeping you stuck, cycling, and in pain? Do you long for spiritual community?
You've tried so many things, but you are still not the person that you know you are capable of being. What you've tried has been insufficient for your personal path of healing and liberation, and your spiritual development is needing more than what you've been able to find.
What you need are tools, methods, and a path that is solid, safe, and that cuts through all the noise and shallow promises.
You need a community of fellowship and support that can go deep and far with you, because you're not an average Joe who is okay with a conventional quick fix. You know that inner development takes work, and you know that spiritual development is necessary to further your purpose and to fill your life with meaning and clarity.
The world is getting more overloaded with self-help books and new gurus every day. And it's clear that conventional wisdom is insufficient to meet the needs of personal transformation. There are many spiritual practices being taught that are dubious, even downright dangerous.
In the monastery membership, all the tools, methods, and practices are deeply steeped in little-known Western esoteric spiritual streams. These streams are thousands of years old and bring many missing pieces to our modern understanding of human psyche and healthy development.
We come together in community to listen, dialogue, and go deep into the essentials of inner work and spiritual growth. Every month we come together in pairs, small groups, and together as a whole community.
The monastery is a place of work and prayer where you practice, train, and build new capacities and strengths that you need to bring to life your true purpose and potential.
Will you join us? The doors will be open for a limited time. Please visit magenta.fm/membership and get on the waitlist.
All right.
Let's talk about Earth, or the starting point, the starting stage in this archetypal path of healing.
Yeah.
Earth represents what is, in a way.
Yep.
It's solid.
Yep.
And although it represents what is, we don't necessarily see all of it. You know, there are many strata in the Earth, and what is there needs to be unearthed, you could say.
Yeah, nice little pun there, Rachel.
Yeah, what we are holding.
Yeah.
And so what we're really talking about is our beliefs is a really big part of it.
Yeah, that's the heart of the matter. What do you believe? And I think that's the beginning point, and it must be, excavated in the right way. And we're going to talk about it in two ways. So the first one is, what do you believe? For instance, for many years, I believed that the world was ruled by indifferent gods. I also believed that I was not worthy. I was not worthy to be heard or seen.
Yeah.
And as a consequence, I then believed that, because I wasn't going to be heard and seen, no one was going to hear and see me. So I believed that the world was therefore ruled by gods who were completely indifferent to me.
Yeah.
That was my belief.
Yeah. And some beliefs, like what you're describing of this unworthiness, we're not necessarily holding those beliefs right on the surface.
Yeah.
We're not wearing them on the arm of our sleeve. It's like those take excavating, I think, for most people to really get to the root of their beliefs.
Yeah. But
and
we can
really see what we're holding. It may start by just recognizing like, oh, I don't really believe that I can, do that. I don't believe I could accomplish that thing. Or maybe you notice that you compare yourself to people and you say, oh, wow, look at that person. They're, so capable. And I'm
so
just not. I'm not capable, and there's like this kind of surface level belief system.
Yep.
And these are just like our everyday assumptions.
Yeah.
And so there's a stage of getting to the deeper beliefs that what inform our sort of everyday beliefs about our interactions, about
outcomes of interactions, or outcomes of our efforts or our activities. What do we expect?
Yeah.
So there's the easily identifiable beliefs that you can pretty easily sit down with your journal and go, okay, what do I actually believe about myself? Well, you probably believe, like we all tend to at certain points, I suck, in all the ways that I suck. And then also do you believe about the world that you can easily identify.
Yeah.
And then the second part of this is the excavation. What do you actually believe that you may not be aware that you believe? And that's a very fruitful excavation project, maybe we could say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so much of this we inherit. We are not consciously coming to these beliefs. They're inherited by our culture. They're inherited by our family. They are formed out of our experiences. They're formed out of what happens to us, especially when we're young children. For instance, like with your caretakers, you form pretty quick beliefs about how do I manage and cope and like get along in this family that I was born into. Maybe I learn pretty quickly that I need to not speak. Children should be seen and not heard.
Yeah.
Or, maybe you learn that you have to yell and shout if you're going to be heard.
Yeah. Or that you have to inwardly control.
Yeah.
So a lot of obsessive compulsive disorder behaviors can begin around 9 years of age. And I remember I've had a number of friends throughout the years who have suffered from this. And they would tell me that they, like driving down the street, they couldn't sleep. They had to be awake. They had to keep their eye on the road because if they didn't, then the others would not be safe. There would be an accident because they were not vigilant.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. So there's a belief operating in there about their responsibility for the safety of their family and how that came about in a child's mind, right?
Yeah.
So there's a belief that started, from a family of origin sort of setup.
Yeah. Or maybe when you're a child, you go to your caregiver with some, heavy emotional pain and your caregiver falls apart. And you learn pretty quickly, that is not safe. I can't have my caregiver falling apart. They need to be taking care of me. And so you learn pretty quickly to suppress and just push down whatever these heavy feelings are that are too much for other people to bear.
Yes.
It's a big one.
Yes, and that you have to carry it alone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you're not conscious of that when you're 5 years old, when you're 10 years old.
Right.
You don't decide that. You don't write it down as a rule in your journal that you're going to live by. So it does take excavating.
Yes.
You just make that assumption about the world because within your everyday consciousness, that's all you know.
Yeah, like the good girl
conditioning.
Conditioning.
Yes.
So you have a belief and apologizing for I'm sorry, but these kinds of behaviors are driven by beliefs that you have about how you're going to be heard and what's going to happen and all of this. So this kind of conditioning, yes.
Also what you just take in from observing your parents and your family.
Yes,
so if you're
osmosis.
raised by, parents who are very insecure, have low self-esteem, don't believe that they're capable of very much, then that's what you see. That's what you take in. And if you don't have other role models giving you a counter picture to that, then that's likely what you're going to adapt on your own. So we can just inherit the beliefs of our parents. So that's one way in which, say, our parents went through severe trauma and then, the child didn't go through trauma and they look at their childhood and they say, I don't really understand. I had a good childhood.
Right.
But they internalize the way of being from their caregiver because that's what they knew and saw.
Yeah.
Their caregiver who was just coping and in survival mode. And Yeah.
Yeah, and that reminds me of attunement. That's something I was thinking about this morning in relation to... I've been reading a lot about schizophrenia lately and really getting into some of these more mysterious psychiatric illnesses.
Yeah.
And you know, people would look at their sister or their brother or somebody in their close family unit or whatever who had developed schizophrenia and understandably look at it as a disease of the brain because there was no other explanation. But what we can actually see is the quality and level of attunement that a child gets from their parents. Like, for instance, in this wonderful movie that a therapist made about this, where he was saying, he was telling this story of, just imagine in New York City, because that's where he practiced as a therapist for like 10 years. Imagine somebody gets a little dog, but they have to work. So they leave the dog in, you know, with lots of toys and whatever, but it's just this little dog all alone in its apartment. There's no outside place to play all day, and they come back at 7 at night, and the dog is pathetically happy to see them. Oh, look, see how much my dog loves me. And some months go by, and then the homeowners association contacts them and says, your neighbors are complaining because your dog is barking all the time and whining. You got to do something about this dog. And the person who has this dog is not attuned to the needs of the dog. Dogs should never be left alone in an apartment for 12 hours by themselves. And that's just a horrible thing to do to a dog. But this person loves this dog.
Yeah.
It's not like they meant to hurt it, but they're not attuned. And why are they not attuned? Because they were not attuned to with their caregivers. So they're not aware of the signals and the signs.
Yeah.
Do you see how subtle this can
Yeah.
be?
It's not like a harsh neglect where you're going to be taken to court and, you know, charged with neglect of your children for
your
not
dog.
feeding them or
Yeah.
It is much more subtle. And Gabor Mate writes a lot about this.
Yes.
And also, this is his premise for his book called Scattered, which is all about ADHD. And his theory, his thesis is that the root cause of ADHD is a lack of attunement from the parents.
Wow.
And he catches a lot of flack for taking this unorthodox view of things, but he brings a lot of research and experience to this thesis that because there is not proper attunement from the parents, the response is to constantly be shifting attention.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of theories about ADHD and that diagnosis, and that some of it is just trying to put human beings or young boys especially into environments that are not, well suited to their needs as a developing child. I think there's a lot of theories out there, but attunement is a really important one. So
we're going to put those references in our show notes. I'm going to put that movie because it's such a beautifully put together movie and really worth watching. It's about half an hour long.
Yeah. Great. Yeah. Also, I'd like to just state that even us talking about all of these beliefs that we carry about ourselves, that in itself is a stage on the excavation journey of Earth, because when we're young or when we're just starting out or when we're not ready to look at ourselves, we can just believe everything about everyone else. People are stupid, people can't be trusted. The world is set up for people who are more privileged than I was. Even just looking at yourself is part of the excavation journey.
Actually, that's a good point, because projection is a really good tool to understand what projection is and to realize that right there is where you can find what you believe about yourself or about the world. So if you notice yourself making an assessment or a judgment about somebody else or about the world that is negative, just realize that what's likely happening is that you're projecting your pain onto someone else or a circumstance. And the line of inquiry you can then make is, okay, this is likely projection. So let's just, assume that it probably is, because it's helpful to... so I was triggered in some way, and then I projected, oh, they are something. And then you can just turn that around and look at yourself. Okay, what do I believe? I believe that they are is this something that I believe about myself? Why do I, so you can find beliefs about yourself or the world out of which that projection was possible to come to.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does make sense. Yeah. I think there's a risk of getting too overly simplistic about it, because sometimes the projection and what we need to learn about ourselves is like, say you're working in a really toxic work environment and you just believe that, this is how the world works. This is about work, and you're just tolerating all this toxicity in your life and you're miserable. You need to look back at yourself. Like, why do I believe that this is what I need to tolerate or subject yourself to every day? Yeah, exactly. So that's, I feel like, a little, caveat that I need to add to that is that
it's not just, if someone is being toxic or someone is being dysfunctional or someone is being abusive, it's not because, don't oversimplify your feelings about that.
Yeah.
So the baseline here is common sense.
Yeah. But
recognize that if you're in a situation where if it's not straight up abuse, and you have a reaction, meaning, you're triggered, meaning you have feelings coming up.
Yeah.
Negative feelings. We're not talking about love or compassion. We're talking about negative feelings like resentment and irritation. That's when that's an opportunity for you to see, okay, so is there a belief operating in me that I wasn't aware was there?
Yeah.
Like your example, you're in a toxic situation, people are behaving terribly. Why are you there?
Yeah, exactly. Like there's maybe a part of you who believes that is correct. Maybe someone's treating you poorly and you're tolerating it because part of you also believes that you deserve to be treated poorly, or that their accusations about you, they're telling you that you're, insufficient, or you're not doing a good enough job, and even though you're working your butt off.
Right.
But there's a part of you that believes, oh, maybe I'm not doing a good enough job. And so you stay and you keep receiving it, and you keep, taking what people are saying about you really personally because there's a part of you that believes that. But again, you said that is very deep. So just some nuance
deep,
there.
But but the picture is you can go deep in earth, and it's really helpful when you do, because of the next phase.
Yeah.
And if you don't manage to get very deep in the first phase, that's okay, because the second phase will get you there.
Yes. Okay. So the second phase is water.
Yes. And
water, what we know about water is it is in motion, it is in flow, it's moving, it's changing. So how do those pictures of this archetypal stage of healing apply to navigating the realm of our soul?
Yeah, so this is where we go from earth, as in what do you believe, to how does your belief play out in space and time? How does your belief play out in space and time? So that's why it's all about process. So now what you need to understand is, how do you act out from this belief? What are your behaviors, and what are your thoughts, and what are your feelings? So we've covered off this terrain in other episodes in this season specifically, where we really go in depth into this process, and we call it mental picture forming. So now it's time to get to know how this belief is beginning and then sustained in you. And what are the thoughts that accompany and play out that lead you to conclude what you conclude. And what is always present are particular kinds of feelings. And those feelings are what we call, in our languaging, we call them non-cognitive, or maybe better said, addictive style feelings. So, for example, feelings like self-pity, I don't know about you, but I've spent many years wallowing in self-pity, and it was a really difficult habit to break. Anger, rage, they're usually negative, and there's a few that are not so negative, like self-importance or vanity, or that kind of thing. But typically we're talking about negative kinds of feelings.
Yeah, doubt, feeling guilty.
Fear, guilty. Yeah, shame is a big one.
Yeah.
These feelings are addictive in nature. Now, you may be like, what? Feelings? Addictive? No, but just sit with that idea and observe for yourself how, when you are angry, how easy is it for you to get to a state of anger? Often anger is a feeling that is permissible. We're allowed to get angry, but we're not allowed to necessarily feel grief because it's too hard, or shame. So we go to anger. So imagine that you're angry, you're in a state of anger, and just try to stop feeling angry when you're really enraged. Just try and stop that. And how long does it take you to come down off of that and then to find your way to a completely different feeling? Or to even turn around and like completely let go of your anger, like you have a choice.
Yeah.
Like you can't. It's really difficult. We're not really in control when it comes to emotions and feelings.
Yeah.
So those are non-cognitive feelings, and they are addictive feelings, and they are always connected to this mental picture forming process. And combined, that's what we call the finished world, out of which you are constantly operating. So you're operating, meaning Earth. This is going to be what is.
Yes.
Because of this finished world that you're constantly cycling through.
Right.
So you got to get to know that cycle.
Observe it.
Yes.
Yeah. And this is where there are a lot of tools and methods to build the capacity, because this is really where the work is. When we're navigating this ocean of our soul realm, it's really this work of the water realm where we are moving and noticing how these mental pictures are forming, how we're reacting to things, and then we have a certain belief that comes up about it, and a feeling, an attached feeling that then gets enmeshed in this, and then we're just in our reactive state. If we can start to observe the motion of this and get to know it, that is how things can start to change, start to shift, loosen up a little bit, I should say. It's like this finished world that's very fixed. Fixed thinking, that's a real...
Yes, or thoughting.
Yeah.
That's not really thinking at all.
No.
Yeah.
This loosening of the finished world is where we start to make some room for change.
Yes.
And transformation.
Yes.
And some of this process might be just getting in touch with your feelings. And that's a really big
That's a big
piece,
deal.
especially if you have feelings that are really suppressed.
Yes.
That is its own, subsection of this whole water realm.
Yeah.
Is getting in touch with the feelings that are, deeply suppressed.
Like what I mentioned earlier, you're allowed to feel anger, but there are feelings there are emotions underneath that you may not realize that the anger is masking.
Yeah.
Because we're allowed to have certain feelings, to feel certain feelings, but not others. And sometimes that's because those feelings that are being suppressed are just too annihilating and too hard to face, which is completely understandable.
Yeah.
And the process of getting to those is, takes care and nourishment.
Yeah. And then another way of working with the feelings, so there's uncovering and working to get clear on, what are the suppressed feelings?
Yeah.
What are the feelings that are being masked? And then there's also the addictive quality of the feelings. So it's a little like damned if you do, damned if you don't. Because then the feelings can come to the surface, be clear, and then you can notice that you are actually addicted to those feelings. And that can be its own process. That's where, in my experience, that's where bringing in the witness to acknowledge in a moment of, in a time of being in these non-cognitive feelings and being stuck in rage or in disappointment or distrust, just having that crowbar of the witness coming in and just being able to see and observe, maybe with my journal or maybe just, in my mind. Normally I needed to be by myself, like could not be processing this with somebody else because I would just get too sucked into the feeling.
Yeah.
Because you are like pulling yourself out of an addictive, something that has an addictive hold on you.
Yeah.
And if you can see, okay, Rachel, you are addicted to rage, and I don't even want to admit that right now because there's a part of you that feels so justified in your rage and your feelings.
Or your self-pity.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you're coming up against a lot, but those capacities get strengthened and strengthened over time.
Yeah.
We use the forces of the witness. We use tools and methods to help us observe and piece apart these different actions that all of us are doing all the time. We're just not bringing our consciousness to it.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot that's going on all the time. And the art of it is that we become aware. And this is why, for me, cognition is the healing force in soul work. Bringing the light, the illumination of your higher self through cognition, and peering into these dark vortices of energy and attention that we invest in. I've been very invested in my feelings of self-pity, but also resentment. Resentment is a huge one. Because we feel, like you said, very justified in our resentment, especially if we're like stay-at-home moms, right? I harbored a lot of resentment for a lot of years. But resentment is an addictive, non-cognitive feeling.
Yeah.
And it's not that you're unjustified. We're not judging the fact that you feel resentful, because we've been there and we are there and we will be there again.
Yes.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
But you've got to become aware of where you're going in your soul.
Yeah.
And so that you can finally have a choice.
Yes.
So this is why water and getting to know the cycle of the forming of the mental pictures about the world, like, oh, my husband doesn't do enough around the house. This is a mental picture that you get to know and that you can then work with, right?
Yeah.
So that was my mental picture. And the resentment that would, I actually never asked him, except for occasionally when I got so desperate, I'd be like, you have to do the dishes.
Yeah.
And he'd be like, well, sure, I have no problem doing the dishes, but you just never asked. I thought you were fine.
Yeah. So my problem is having like way too unrealistic expectations, of like,
really?
I just have so many things that I want to do. And then it's, I can give like way too long of a list.
Right.
Ask for too much or just be disappointed in, the level of what is physically possible to have accomplished, because we have 3 kids and there's a lot to do.
Yeah.
And so I carry that myself, like, oh my gosh, there's so much that needs to be done all the time. I'm constantly have my lists in my mind and getting the kids through their routines and then somehow getting the house managed and my work done,
Right.
And so I can just totally project that onto my husband.
Right. Lucky guy.
Yeah. No.
Yeah.
Oh, so anyway, there's a lot of forms that, our resentment can take hold, but there are tools to get clear on it, to start to own it, to stop blaming the people in your life.
Yeah.
And
take your power back.
And this is a lot of what we're going to be doing in our membership that we are about to open the doors for in June.
Yay, so excited. Yes.
We will be working through these different methods and tools so that you can take these ideas and concepts and actually apply them to your life and your challenges.
With a lot of help and support.
Yeah. So that these are not just, lofty thoughts and concepts, but we want to make it very practical for you because we it's kind of worthless if it's not practical.
Yeah, and we are very practical people.
Yeah.
We're not really interested in deep abstraction.
Yes.
For the hell of it.
Yeah.
We are not philosophers. We are definitely...
We're very interested in philosophy.
We are, but only if it's useful.
Exactly.
Yeah, so the membership is really about the training aspect of this work.
Yeah.
We give away as much as we can on this podcast and on our e-zine. By the way, a little plug for our e-zine. Sign up. We've got some tools that we're going to be launching.
We do have some gifts. Yeah, coming up this month, relating to some tools that can help you with this water excavation process.
Yes. So sign up. If you're not a part of our e-zine, please sign up. We're really starting to rev that up and share a lot, because one thing that we understand about our work is that we want to give away all this knowledge, all this information that we have suffered for. We're giving it away for free. This podcast really is the sort of center of that, but the e-zine is very much a part of that, and also our socials. So if you're not following us on socials, follow us on socials, because that's another good place for short and sweet moments. It's in our membership program, and also with our Elevated Presence Masterclass. This is where we really walk you through the actual practice steps. It's a step by step. So that's where we're really holding space for, it's like a dojo. Because you can have all the knowledge in the world, but if you're not practicing rhythmically and regularly, that's where the rubber really hits the road.
Yeah, try reading about being a samurai martial artist for 10 years, reading every book you can find about it, and then thinking that you're going to be able to hold your own in a sword fight. You just won't. You have to do the work. You have to put it into practice and go through a training.
Yeah, that's right. And there's so much information out there. Yeah. And it's just overwhelming. There's new self-help books being written every day. And there's so much of it. And we're like, you've got to find the signal through the noise. And that's what the membership is about. It's like we're just taking it down to the brass tacks. Yeah. And if you're listening to this podcast, the kind of stuff and the information that we're working with. Yeah. This is it, right? But the tools and the methods that we use, that's not what we're talking about here, obviously, but that's what we bring, because they have to be, it's like meditation. You can understand about it, you can know what you're supposed to do, but you also need to have a little help with getting it going in your life.
Yeah, a little hand-holding.
A little hand-holding is really helpful. Yeah. Because we're all very overwhelmed. Yeah.
And we need to see each other. That is such a big part of the healing process.
Yes.
Is to see and be seen.
Yeah, and this is a big part. Yes. And that's a big part of the membership is the community experience. Yeah. Because it's not just about, Rachel and I are creating the container for this, and we're creating the structures, and we're bringing the tools and the ideas and the conversation starters and the dialogue possibilities. But really, it's an excuse also to bring all these wonderful people together and getting the dialogue going there. Yeah. So this peer-to-peer, amongst people who are who are really holding the priority of their personal development in a similar way. Mm-hmm. And also for people who need a deeper dive than what's really available. Yeah. Where else can you have dialogues that are not only about personal development, but they're also about spiritual development? Because in my world, these two things are the same. Mm-hmm. They should be the same. Yeah. But not only that, dialogues around what is the purpose of my wound? Mm-hmm. And so we have this tool, I guess you could call it, where your wound is and can be your gift. And it's a real place of discovery, and you learn why you're here. And this is a part of the dialogue that we are bringing as well. Yeah. Why you're here, what is your purpose, and how can we help you bring that to life in a much deeper or bigger or more focused way than you would otherwise be able to bring to life. Yes.
And the reversal is that the thing that is limiting you from reaching your purpose is exactly what you need. The transformation of what has been limiting you is exactly what is needed for you to bring your gifts
to the
world and fulfill the destiny that you have in this life.
Yeah, and you do have one.
Yes, you do.
Yeah. Yeah.
So take it from us. Okay, so let's talk about air and the realm of reversal. So air is the third stage of our archetypal stages of healing. So we started at earth, what is fixed, what is there, what is living deep down in the strata of our of our soul.
Yeah.
And then we went into water, where things are moving and flowing, and we can see how these are showing up in our life. And the more that we observe it, then the more that we have the possibility to, shift things, and things can loosen up a little bit when we start to bring our witnessing or our cognition to this process of how things are playing out in shape and time. And we really get more intimate with this whole, this whole process that's happening in our soul, just when we're just walking through the world, where we're just going to work and in our marriage and with our families. And little did we know there's this great drama playing out within us. So that's water.
Yeah.
The third step is air. Step.
And this air this is really at the heart of this episode. This is the most important thing. If you can grok this, then we've done our job. And it's not easy. When my teacher, Dennis Klochek, was teaching this to my class, I got it, sorta, but it took me another 10 years to really understand and to be able to now, represent it to others. So I aim to make that learning process a hell of a lot shorter if I possibly can for everybody else. But this is basically everything that you previously believed, Earth, and held to be true about the world or yourself is actually its opposite. It's reversal. So what happens is you, as you go through this healing process, especially in water, and you get to know that what is coming to you is actually coming from you. That's reversal. So it might sound a little mysterious, but stay with us. Yeah. Because this is very, very important. The phenomena of reversal is interesting because you can find a lot of analogs for reversal in nature. Like, did you know that the flow of water is actually vortexial in nature? And yes, you might know that it's, goes round and round, but actually it goes both forward and backward. And that is how fish can get up a waterfall, like incredibly fast. Have you ever seen a fish go up a waterfall? Like, it's gravity defying. How do they do that? Yeah. So here's the thing. If you do your work properly in water, you can get to reversal. And this is kind of the secret of this process. So as you do the work of processing and digesting and working through and coming to understand that what is coming to you, and you start to realize that actually it's coming from you, that your beliefs are driving so much of how you experience the world and how you experience your own participation in the world. And when you begin to realize that your beliefs have been limiting you, and they have been causing you to draw conclusions that may even be wrong about the world and about yourself. Like, for instance, I believed that I was unworthy, and I saw a lot of evidence, therefore, in the world for that belief. And I saw myself as a failure, and I had a whole plethora of reasons why I could believe that, I'm just thinking of all the conversations that I've had with my husband about this. And I'm a failure. And he's like, no, you're not. Here's all the things that you've succeeded. Yeah, but what about all these things? All this evidence that I have. And this is the kind of belief that needs to be reversed.
Yes. And it only can happen organically, in a way, within yourself, because
No one
Your
can do that for
husband
you.
presenting all of those
Yeah.
pieces of evidence did not change your mind.
No, it did not.
You cannot.
It was helpful. Yeah.
Yeah. It can help get you through the hump.
Yeah.
And if you struggle with being lovable and
Yes.
your partner lists all the reasons that they love you so much, maybe it gets you out of like a dark, place momentarily, but it's not going to be the reversal.
No.
And what's sort of tricky about these stages of healing, this is what we mean when we say that it's not a formula, is that you cannot jump to the reversal. You cannot will this into being. You have to go through the process of witnessing what is happening in the water element and bringing your full cognition to it. And only then does it organically come out of that.
Yeah.
You can't just, force yourself to say, oh, I believe that I'm a failure. And so now, okay, I see that belief and I'm going to just believe that I'm capable now and I'm going to get over my insecurity and self-doubt. Mm-hmm. You can't force it, because if that's not happening on its own, it's because you don't have the full picture.
Yeah, that's
Maybe that's because there's suppressed feelings that you haven't let yourself feel yet.
Yeah.
There's maybe because there's more beliefs that are sort of intertwined.
Deeper down.
That are deeper down, exactly.
Yeah.
Because when you have the whole picture, that's when you have this loving compassion. It just comes forth sort of naturally. If you understand someone's, biography and what they've been through and where they came from and everything that they're holding, there's like just this compassion that you can hold for that person and somebody's story. Mm-hmm. And so when you learn to be able to witness yourself and have this deep understanding of yourself and these own processes, these wounds that are playing out in you, the feelings that you're addicted to, even though you're addicted, you have to break away from the addiction, but also have, compassion for why that was there in the first place,
Right.
And through that whole gesture in the loving compassion, then it just shifts.
Yeah, and it shifts because you found yourself finally able to have a choice about whether you were going to hold on to the belief or you were going to be able to let go and say, I now see the full import of what I've been harboring. And I'm seeing that I'm ready to let that go now. In these stories of 7 arrows, there's lots of stories in here. They're medicine stories. Probably the most famous from this book, I suspect, is called Jumping Mouse. And it's a fantastic teaching story about this process, all about reversal. So this little mouse, Jumping Mouse, I'm not going to tell the story because it's much better if you read it. It's much better told. But he has to give away very precious things before he can receive the wisdom that he's after. And the very thing that he's most afraid of is the very thing that he becomes. So we have to sacrifice our lower self for the sake of our higher self. Or another way to put that is we have to face our wounds and we have to face what the darkness in us, our shadow. We have to get to know it. We have to, in ancient alchemical lexicon, cook and eat our shadow. We have to embrace it with love and compassion to what you're saying. Yeah. Not with any other gesture, but really with that love and compassion. It's like we embrace it, right?
Yeah. It's not we're not kicking it out. We're not giving it the boot.
No.
We're not
hating on it.
We're not cutting off that part of ourselves.
No. Doesn't work.
Exactly. It doesn't work. It needs to be a loving embrace. And in that, there is this redemption because when we experience that loving compassion from our witness, from our cognition and understanding, we realize that this wound or this identity is not actually who we are.
Right.
So maybe the identity is like victimhood, and there's these beliefs and assumptions and addictive feelings that we've been carrying around with us our whole life. And the reversal process is seeing this whole picture and seeing the tremendous gifts that the victim person is not seeing in themselves. Having compassion, but it's not pity. It's not, oh, I'm so sorry that you're a victim. It's, no, you are not a victim.
Right.
You are actually not a victim, and taking that in, believing that, oh yes, I'm not a victim. And on the flip side of this, I am a courageous warrior. Who would have thought? It's just
right.
But it's through the being held and then integrated, and that's why I think a lot of trauma therapists, and we're going to talk a lot about trauma next episode, use the picture of the child part, so the inner child, and it's not necessarily that everything comes from the child. But we're so caring and loving with children, so it's treating them
parenting.
that way, and then it's integrating. But it's within that there is a redemption of this identity of victim or of worthless person.
Yes, and on that, this is a part of the addictive cycle, is that at least we know who we are when we're in that state of victimhood or self-pity, which is kind of a victimhood, really. We know who we are. And the challenge here is that when we let that go, we no longer know who we are. But we have to do that before we can discover another part of us that we didn't know was there.
Yes.
We have to empty out. We have to become an empty cup. And because while we're in our wounded state, we are a full cup.
Right.
And when you're a full cup, you can't receive. You like if you're a full cup full of self-pity, it's really hard to receive love, like from another person, or acknowledgement, or recognition, or appreciation. Oh, thank you so much. That was so amazing what you did for me. Oh yeah, it was nothing. It's really hard to receive these kinds of gifts from other people
and from ourselves. If we feel that if we
acknowledge our own,
if we're a full cup full of guilt and self-doubt and just feeling like believing that we're a failure, believing that we can't get things done, we can't focus, we're not
You're just
capable.
Full of these thoughts and beliefs and mental pictures.
Then we're too full to actually allow our gifts and capacities to grow and flourish and see that, oh, I can develop myself as a leader, and I do have these capacities for, bringing these great gifts to the world. And maybe they're still in an early form that needs work and, development to, fully blossom, but the seed is there.
Right.
And the seed is not going to grow into what it is meant to be if
there's a lot of weeds around.
Exactly. Weeds of shame and beliefs about being incapable.
Yeah, and I'm gonna throw an idea out there that may or may not land because it's kind of abstract, but I'm just gonna do it anyway, just in case. And that is, reversal is the language of the higher self. What does that mean? That means that when you start to recognize reversal happening in your life, oh, I used to believe that, but now I don't. What happens is when you have that kind of illumination, sometimes it can be a cathartic sort of moment of aha, where or an insight drops in and you're like, oh, now I understand this thing, this piece I didn't understand before. Those kinds of experiences where there's a moment where you realize that you were holding an assumption that was not correct or helpful or healthy or that kind of thing. Sometimes it feels like it comes out of nowhere. Sometimes it comes from another person who says something to you and you're like, oh my God, that's the answer to this question I've been holding all this time, and you just told me, you just said it to me. Or whatever. It's like it comes from a peripheral place, and that's your higher self speaking to you. That's what we mean by being filled with your seed or your potential that can't find its way in so long as you're closed off, so long as you're a full cup. So wherever you see reversal, and hopefully you have a feel for this, not just an intellectual understanding, but you have a feel. You're like, oh, I can look back in my life and I can see where that has happened for me. And I can see, oh yeah, that is a kind of a reversal that happened, right? That is the language that your higher self speaks naturally. So what we can now do is learn to speak the language of reversal in our inner personal work. And that is a part of how we can understand the nature of the wisdom that is already in us. Because remember, the higher self is the part of us that we all have as a given part of who we are. It's given to us, like our physical body. What's not given is our connection to our higher self. But if you know that this part of you is not broken, it's not wounded, it's not a victim, it's your sovereign spiritual nature that we have to learn to have a dialogue with. And there are methods and techniques that we will go into in the membership. But enough said on that. So that is reversal. Yeah.
I just want to read some of these examples that you wrote here because I think that they're really good. So here's one. Previously, I believed that only my truth mattered, but now I'm seeing that others have their own version of the truth that is no less valid. So the reversal is that the truth is actually many-sided and not singular and only mine.
Shall I read the next one?
Yeah.
So the next one is, I thought I was being ignored, but now I'm seeing that I assumed I was being ignored. And that makes a difference because I can see how I set myself up. I set myself up for the conclusion that I drew when I was triggered. So the reversal is, I always believe I'm being ignored, but now I can see I'm not being ignored, just I'm assuming so.
Yes. And then the third one, I thought I was being betrayed because I realized now that I expect it. This is a self-fulfilling prophecy. So the reversal is that I see now that I was seeing everything as betrayal instead of what it actually was, which wasn't betrayal at all. It was just an expression of another person's attempt to meet their own need, and that had nothing to do with me, and it wasn't personal.
Yeah.
Okay, those are really good examples, and I think we should take another break and then come back to our fourth and final stage of the
fire.
Yes, stages of healing. Hello, thank you for watching or listening to today's episode of Magenta FM. We want to take a moment and tell you that we have a lot of useful resources for you on our website at magenta.fm.
And actually, we want you to know that we're now regularly holding and hosting webinars. And in those webinars, we dive into some really juicy and challenging topics. We don't just do a bunch of downloading. We actually do exercises. We bring tools. We journal right there and then, and we do plenary, and of course, lots of Q&A. So you can go to our website at magenta.fm. You can sign up for the next available webinar, and we're holding those on a regular basis. So we hope to see you there.
And lastly, one of the best ways that you can support our show is by sharing it with friends or family who you think might find it helpful or interesting. So you can just pause the show right now, text your friend a link to magenta.fm/podcast, and there they can see all the episodes and listen to the most recent one or one that jumps out at them. And we really appreciate your support.
Thank you so much.
Okay, welcome back. Yes, fourth and final stage, fire.
Yes, this is the element of fire represents the insight or lesson that arises when we are able to assimilate both the belief and its opposite.
Yeah, the assimilation phase.
Yes. But this is really interesting and it's important because what needs to arise in this is really the fire question, which is, what does this have to do with my destiny? How has this wound shaped my destiny? Mm-hmm. And it has, and it does, and it will. And like we've referred to before, and probably many times on this podcast, your wound is also your gift. And St. Paul had some kind of quote around this of, my weakness is my strength, or something like that. Inherent in your weakness is your greatest strength if you heal it? And can you see how that makes, there's something commonsensical about that.
Yeah.
You know, you're holding all these beliefs that are weakening you.
Yeah.
They are preventing you from really bringing your life to its fullest potential, why you're here. And I would like to propose that before you were born, before the angel of forgetting touched you so that you forgot everything, there was an intention that you brought with you, but you've forgotten it. And you're going to, spend a lot of time, like I certainly have, of trying to remember what I came to do. This is really important, and it really ties into the work that Rachel and I really love to do and want to do, and what we're bringing to life in the membership program is, this is more than just about your healing, okay? Yeah. This is about you're forging medicine for yourself when you go through this healing process. Now, that medicine can be medicine for others.
Right.
And so it's really about service.
Yes.
And I tell you, that's the most meaningful thing you can do, is turn around and help others.
Yeah. In one way, our medicine, our wounds and our healing becomes medicine for others, because we can share about our experiences, and we can, help others who are in similar situations. And that's the life path for some people.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of other forms that this can take too. So if you have a really big wound around, speaking up, or maybe you're really afraid of conflict, and you've just, bent your life around fearing conflict, but you finally go through all of these healing stages. And, maybe in the end, you were supposed to be this master facilitator.
Yeah.
And the world needs that gift that needs your role. It needs your participation in us forming the world together.
Yeah.
So it's not that we're saying everybody needs to be a therapist, or everybody needs to be, helping others through their wounds, although you can, especially people who and love, and, just sharing your story with your spouse or your family. I mean, that is healing.
Yeah.
But on a larger purpose, the world needs leaders. The world needs, people to step into, new ideas and step into things that we all thought were, impossible. Like, it's impossible to make a living as a farmer. It's just that day and time is over.
Right.
And maybe there is some, transformation of your wounds and your limits and your doubts that leads you to some new form of community agriculture or earth healing. Yeah. So there's so many different, ways that we mean this. We mean this medicine making, or
yes, that's right. Yeah. Medicine making in any career, in any situation, you name it. Yeah. There's medicine that you can bring to your activities in the world. Yeah.
And sometimes that's a career change.
Sometimes it is.
Letting go of something you thought you should do for, something that is newly arising from you, within you. And sometimes it's just going about things in a new way,
Exactly.
Maybe you're
a
lawyer.
It's really not about the what.
Yeah.
It's all about the how.
Yes.
That's my uncle's favorite quote. Part of this, the reason why I brought this pre-birth intention is because I have found this to be true, and you can test it for yourself, listeners, if you want. But here's what I have come to believe, and that is that without a spiritual worldview, it's really difficult, if not impossible, to really fully heal. And the reason is because of assimilation. If you don't, so if you could just hold this idea, you don't have to believe it, but just hold it to see if it's true. Because again, our main tool when it comes to this first-person science is, in my view, common sense. We can always improve our capacity for common sense. Not all of us have a, a really good ability to common sense, but we can always practice, right? But it needs to be our tool. And just imagine if we did have a pre-birth intention. And just imagine that reincarnation was actually something that exists, and that we have had previous lives where we have taken the kernel of what we experienced and learned in those previous lives, and we bring them into the realm of the dead, where we live, and we just work with it there, and we become eventually ready to be born again into a new life here on earth. We're drawn to come back, and the reason being because we're carrying the seeds of our development and our journey, and we're ready to continue that process. And so here we are, we're this star, and we we help our parents come together, and then, you know, here we come, and we have this pre-birth intention, but it's built out of previous experiences and learnings and suffering, and the redemption of that. We bring that with us. So this question of assimilation is so much bigger than just, oh, I have this issue with my friend, and I want to, you know, find it. Like, that doesn't really have anything to do with my destiny. No, it might not, but this might be a pattern in your life. That you keep having this kind of altercation with somebody whom you love, and it's driving a belief in you about betrayal. And that this is actually a part of a bigger picture, a bigger story in your life, that this question that you're really wrestling with, that in there is the secret to your destiny. So there's such profound depths to your biography and your healing and your and to this question of destiny, this fire. And it's fire because you burn through it. You know, healing is not for the faint of heart. You know?
That's true. And I'll just add that, you know, if you don't hold this picture of reincarnation, but maybe you hold a picture of coming to earth with certain God-given gifts.
Oh, yes.
God-given talents that are, you know, lying dormant in you, and that God will give you a certain challenges to go through to forge and strengthen those gifts. So, you know, we personally do subscribe to reincarnation, but it's not necessary. There's a lot of ways, there's a lot of, you know, spiritual perspectives that also, you know, hold this same idea of forging a spiritual destiny through our challenges and hardships and coming to some, you know, greater purpose and greater gift and seed that's within us through that.
And you don't have to know who you were in past lives. I think it's really important to say, I think that there is a lot of people who do things like past life regression work and stuff like that. I actually think that's dangerous. I'm not saying that it's bad or that you shouldn't do it.
But morally wrong.
No, nothing like that. There's a reason why we don't remember. And it's because we need to have the capacity to understand what to do with the information that we receive if we do something like past life regression.
Right. Or listen to somebody else's interpretation. I mean, some people may be born with that in themselves and feel like they remember that, and that's fine for them and their experience. But if that's different than going to somebody else
who's doing it
tell
for
you. Yes, exactly.
And you don't know what kind of lens they have and what kinds of assessments that they're making, how much projection they're putting into it. So it's a bit of a minefield. So yes, to build on your point, it's not necessary to remember this stuff, but it can help if you hold this picture that the higher self is what is the spiritual part of you that we keep talking about. Put it in the context of reincarnation, where that's what goes from life to life, and that's why it's so damn wise. You know, it's carrying the seeds of your learning, and how you've internalized all of that deep inside, and bringing the seeds of that into each life, and it's there as potential for you to learn how to tap into.
Okay, so let's do a little recap.
All right.
So we are talking about the 4 stages of healing that we go through in our own way on our own journey. And you started with this really great picture or metaphor of being sailing and navigating the open seas. And we don't necessarily have a map, but we need to have tools. And it's similar with navigating the realm of our soul life, which can feel like a big open sea that's very dark, deep down. We can't really peer into the bottom of it. So there are tools that can help us navigate through this. And there are stages on this process. So starting with Earth represents the beliefs that we are carrying.
What is
On the surface level, and then deep down, which needs, careful excavation and unearthing. Exactly.
Yeah.
Be a little archaeologist.
Yeah.
Then the next phase is water. And this is where a lot of the work happens, which is the work of observing and learning more and more into how these beliefs are flowing through our lives, our everyday lives, and really shaping things through our mental picture forming. And we did a little bit of a recap on that. Mental picture forming. This is something we talk about a lot. It's something we're emailing some tools out to help people process through in their own lives. So sign up for our email list. So water is where we get to know our feelings, we get to know our thoughts, we get to see how those are playing out in our everyday in our interactions, in our reactions, in the choices that we're making and the choices that we're not making. And the more that we witness and cognize and understand what is happening in this realm, the more freedom and healing that comes to it, until eventually we have the whole picture that we are able to hold with our higher self, with our witness. And once we have that whole picture of this wound in us that we've been carrying from our ancestors, from our family, from our own experiences, from our feelings that we are very natural that we had at some point, but we've become addicted to them. We hold all of this picture, and in that, there is healing, and the healing is really in the reversal, in the air stage, where we redeem this part of ourselves. We redeem this identity that we've been holding about ourselves.
Yeah, we realize that actually the opposite is true.
Yes.
Not what we believed.
Yeah. The world is not betraying you, but actually you are very loved.
Yeah. For example.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You are actually not a victim. You are very strong and capable person that is here with beautiful gifts.
Yeah.
And then the last fourth stage is fire, which is the stage of assimilation, and really how does this fit into your destiny and your purpose in this lifetime? And that's why we like to say that your healing is world healing, because the world needs you to bring your gifts forth. So in the meantime, please go to our website, magenta.fm, sign up for our newsletter.
Yes.
And we're sending free gifts out this month in the form of some trainings and tools that we know are really useful and helpful because we've used them and we've helped other people use them. So we are excited to share them with you, and we don't want you to miss out. So that's magenta.fm, and you just scroll to the bottom and find our newsletter. And then lastly, please pass this podcast along to people. Just send them a link to it and say, hey, I think you might find this show interesting. You could just send them magenta.fm/podcast, and that will take them right to our show page. And we really appreciate everyone helping us get the word out.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. All right. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and we really look forward to getting into our next one coming up.
Yeah, we'll see you then.
All right.